Stop spending your money on stupid shit. You get to choose what you spend your money on. Learn how to stop spending money on stupid shit.
Sweet. We are back. Meaningful Times with Friends, episode 32. Welcome back, everybody. I am here, Mean Dave, with, as usual, the OG friends, as I refer to them, the Nathan Nation, Merely Jason, Spoolie D. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever the hell you're watching these things or listening. Did anybody have anything they needed to say sorry about this week?
I got a quick one.
Hang on. Let me gotta get the puppy.
The last couple episodes, I haven't been prioritizing my grooming. I've been prioritizing keeping this torso in tip-top video shape. I can't rely on my pretty face like the other three. So typically right before I try to squeeze in a workout, didn't have time to shower. So the last one, you could see a circle of sweat on my chest. And this one, it's kind of a hot mess. So apologize for that. That's all. Thanks, Dave.
I didn't even call attention to it. So any other apologies before I go further?
I would like to say something.
Yes. Merely Jason.
Today's the 3rd anniversary of our friend Mario's death. So I thought we should all have a moment of solemn remembrance.
I like how Nathan just barely stifling laughter.
Yeah.
No, this seems
Back
earnest.
up, Mario.
Let's hear Jason out here.
I was expecting people to laugh when I said that. That wasn't
Yes.
really actually serious at all.
That works for a good joke.
Rest in peace, Mario. Death sucks.
3 years, man. And it's not the anniversary, but 2 years since Gary.
Gary died on the 6th of September.
We honor Gary and Mario today. Friends, real meaningful friends and frenemies.
Oh, sorry, the 9th of September.
But yeah, it's around this time.
Yeah.
Looking at my Gucci, it's about that time. That was our apologies / memorials section there. And I do have a little bit of some props. I'll give some props this week. Last episode, we did something different. We had video brought in from Spoolie D. It was a really cool way to have him in the loop for the episode. And normally Spoolie is quite the antagonist of operations here at Meaningful Times with Friends. So I want to thank him for taking about 7 minutes of his time total to record those videos and get them to us, because I know his schedule is a tight run ship over there.
Okay, so here's my question. Both times we've had Dan Lactose on, you've come with these charts. Like, I think the first time it was good band name versus bad name. You had sort of charts about that. And then this past episode, you had a chart about the price of beef, I think it was. Is that intentional, or is that totally just a coincidence?
I think it's a subliminal like DIY thing, because like these guys are like legit DIY musicians and I'm like a legit DIY pseudoscience chart maker.
Got it. All right.
Complete coincidence.
Thank you for addressing that. So this week, it was brought to our attention by Spoolie D to try and find a topic that would enable him to give him a window into some memories that he had of some behavior, rather than trying to find a window in some topic as a guise to bring up this memory. I was like, fuck it. Let's just call meaningful memories. So that's what we have here, is some meaningful memories. So Spoolie, why don't you take lead on today's meaningful memories?
When you're a kid in suburbia, and this is what I realized, that the thing we all four had in common is we didn't play sports or have any sort of like organized activity. We weren't in theater or anything to like counteract the fact that when you live in a soulless like 60s, 70s tract expansion suburbia, you start to run out of things to do and you start looking at ways to alter your state, because your environment is the same. And you could go from Newark to Fremont, same, go to Union City, same, go to Hayward, same. Like there's really nowhere to go. You go to Milpitas, same. So at a certain point, because you can't change your environment and you have no activities, you start trying to find new and interesting ways to get fucked up. I feel like I wasn't a pioneer in that space, but I thought I definitely was a member of the try to get fucked up on weird shit community. One time we had a bomb threat. I don't know if you were there, Dave. They had a bomb threat at our high school and they evacuated us all to the football field. Do you remember this?
I do not have a memory of being there during a bomb scare. So
I have a weird feeling that you weren't there.
I might have had the day off or been on a trip or something.
I think it was me, Jason, and Marie Olt, or it was me, Ben, and Marie Olt, went to Food for Less because we got let out of school. I looked at the alcohol content of Nighttime, which was the Food for Less version of NyQuil, and at the time it was like 25%. I was like, whoa, this is 50 proof. I got a bottle of it, went back to Marie's house, downed the whole thing, and began to time travel. That basically unlocked the world of, oh, there's ways to get fucked up. And I didn't do pot or anything.
Do pot.
I didn't do
pot. You didn't smoke weed. Let's try to keep it in vernacular that people can understand.
I did not use Nathan's Toke tray. So that was kind of the gateway drug. I tried smoking cinnamon sticks. I don't know if you were there for that one, Jason. That didn't work. There's some some duds. Like I tried making like tea or like a drink out of nutmeg because I heard that could get you fucked up. Obviously the smoking banana peels.
Wait, did you crush the cinnamon stick and like roll it up in a paper, or did you just light it like a cigar? How did that go down?
Yes, that exact thing.
Okay.
And again, this all goes back to like, if you keep someone in suburbia long enough without activities, this is just the inevitable outcome. Then I started getting a little more advanced at this. So I realized that like Sudafed could get you really fucked up. Now you can't, like in California, you can't really buy it without ID. But back then, if you took enough Sudafed, your head would tingle. It's almost like over-the-counter speed. And then I found the mother, which was Mini Thins. Mini Thins was a broncholator. Now think of the premise of this. It's asthma medication sold literally on the counter at 7-Eleven. So if you have like a serious medical condition, are you really going to go to 7-Eleven and try and medicate yourself? It was another like weird version of speed. Like a lot of us started taking that. And some of the byproducts
Not speed, Mini Thins.
Mini Thins. Yeah, no, I've never taken speed.
No, you've taken speed. It was just called Mini Thins.
Yeah.
It was like pre-Adderall.
It was ephedrine. That started a movement. Not a good one either. Other things, Doan's back pills. Painkillers are basically neuroinhibitors. So it's separating like your brain from your physical body, right? So it's making your brain not register pain. And so if you have anxiety or stress or sadness, if you take enough painkillers, it'll eventually make you not feel like stressed out or sad or anxious. And the anxiety brought on by being in a soulless suburb with nothing to do. And then the last one I found out was NyQuil gel caps. If you take enough of those, you will start hallucinating hard if you don't fall asleep. And if you take too many, you'll get explosive diarrhea. But I'm talking like 6, 7, 8 like NyQuil caps. That wraps up my trip down memory lane, Dave.
You thought that a topic would be people trying to find do-it-yourself ways of getting high if you didn't have access to the generally accepted drugs of marijuana, LSD, mushrooms, or any of the like that existed at the time. I remember you, Jason, Ben, it would come up in conversations and I just would always remember shaking my head. I did benefit from your canary in the coal mine with the Mini Thins, but I didn't even take them very often. I didn't really care for them all that much. But it was pretty popular at the time, but everybody remembers the Anarchist Cookbook. Mm-hmm. And I think that some of those were described in the Anarchist Cookbook. I think particularly something with the banana peels and stuff. But whenever you guys brought this up in conversation, this was one of those things that would just make me kind of roll my eyes. I'm like, just be patient and wait until you get some real drugs. But when you mentioned the cough syrup, you are a pioneer in that regard, because I remember during the hyphy era in the Bay Area, one of the more popular concoctions is a drink known as Scissor. Anybody know of Scissor? You guys know of it? Yeah.
It's cough syrup with codeine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that shit's good. I had some of that.
Oh, yeah. Isn't it also called the Purple Drank?
Yeah, they were names.
Dat Perp.
I just remember when it was brought up at that time, I was like, oh yeah, Spoolie D used to kind of dabble in that area, but I didn't participate in your experimental methods. I was just like, I'll wait till some weed comes around. I wasn't even really much of a weed guy in high school. It was more the LSD when I found LSD.
You have a very special relationship with that drug. I don't know anyone who can be that controlled under that stuff.
As LSD informed me, I was a very tightly wound sociopath. Just from my upbringing, it was where I was consciously hearing the fact that I lied compulsively on a regular basis in my head. My first conscious lie was to my father. The subject of my now stepdad, whenever that was brought up, he would get very irate. And then I told my sister, I said, we have to pretend that we don't like Mark around Dad so that he doesn't get upset. That was at 6 years old, directing my sister to be like, we have to lie to appease the adults. It was sort of like the beginning of a behavior pattern to manipulate circumstances outside of your control. I was aware of this before I got in 12-step recovery. My first real strong trip on LSD and the ones after that, you're in a stream of consciousness, literally in your thoughts. And I remember thinking that I really did not have faith in the truth as I understood it, like just being honest with people. I remember one lie. I do remember, and I got called on it. It was when I went to go see the band Violence at the Stone with the Slambodians, which we got brought up in our chat recently. And they were doing a video recording. It was a crazy show. I was like 12, 13 years old. I went with Dennis Cullen and, if you remember, Jacob Ludlow, if you remember him.
Yep. He's a basketball player too, by the way.
Yeah, he was an athlete. That was when he was still kind of a Hesher metalhead and rolled with us. So the show was sold out, and this is, late 80s metalheads at their most hostile, violent. I'm little. My size at the time, I was not a big person. The show was insane. I did get up in the front. When Violence kicked off, I very easily could have gotten seriously hurt. Everybody's climbing up to try and get on the stage to stage dive. I did try.
Oh, I remember this. Yeah. Do you remember this, Jason?
I remember the follow-up line. Michael Sills was involved in the response to this because I was in the front for all of probably one, maybe two songs. It may have related more to being in the pit because I did go in the pit. I was there all of 15 seconds, maybe 20. Because I went in there and got spit right the fuck out. There are some grown-ass men in this fucking thing. One guy, I remember seeing him because he was like the loudest punk rocker-looking dude there in like spiked leather jacket and a colored mohawk and all that. And I remember him, not crawling, but like on the ground, on his butt, kicking himself out of the pit, holding his... Yeah, he kicked my computer. He was holding his ankle. He couldn't walk. He injured himself in this intense pit. There were people that were bleeding from mosh pit injuries. It was a crazy-ass pit. The band's called Violence. People are climbing over me to get to the stage to stage dive. I don't know if my lie was that I did stage dive.
It was.
It was. Okay, so I did say that I stage dive. I didn't. I did not stage dive. And the response, I believe, from you and Michael Sills was, well, that's a 10 on the bullshit scale.
It wasn't me because I didn't know what stage diving was, but it was Mike and somebody else. There was two people. It might have been, remember James Hahn? The other guy that
was... it was a fun show. I still remember. I had a lot of fun there, even though this is beyond me. I did say that I think I stage dived. It's kid shit. That was just one example of like this pattern that I consciously knew about myself. It wasn't very often. Biggest lies that I would tell were mainly probably to my parents or to people that were older than me that had power over me. But once I took acid, I was confronted with all of that. And I thought about it, and I'm like, why do I lie? I don't need to lie. I need to not be afraid to be honest with people. And as much as I thought that would help, in many cases it did, because it would peel the Band-Aid off in terms of dealings with people rather than hiding. I didn't want to hide, really.
Yeah, peeling the Band-Aid off with a carving knife. The Day of Truth Bomb era was fucking wonderful.
Mario always had the best line about kind of my metamorphosis, where he said, you were one of the quietest people through high school, and then you started taking acid, and then you turned like 23 and started talking and never shut the fuck up since. I had to laugh at that. One of my favorite, this wasn't a lie, but this was one of the things that I loved. I'm pretty sure you know this, Spoolie. Mr. Halford, he declared at the beginning of our senior year English class that he can tell if you've read the book or not. And if he can tell that you didn't read the book, you get an automatic B or less. You will not get an A if he can tell. And the first book we did was Hard Times.
God, what a fucking miserable slog of a fucking piece of shit book.
Yeah, well, I didn't read the book. I took detailed notes from all the bullshit in the class, and I meant to read the book, but I just didn't get around to it. What now is diagnosed as ADHD, I might have had some aversion to like reading things that I wasn't interested in. I love reading today, but I had a hard time then with it. And I took these detailed notes, and I wrote my paper regurgitating colorfully all of those notes, and I got an A-. Yeah, so that was what the drug did for me. It was just confronting a level of honesty. I was honest with myself in the fact that I knew what I was doing. It's weird. I always wonder what my life would have been like if I had not taken acid and been confronted with my own brain.
Back to hard times. Why the fuck would you take like an author that's like world renowned, find his most fucking boring, inaccessible book, and then force a bunch of people? We could have like literally read like 3 or 4 other books that are way better, or at least more entertaining than Hard Times. That's just fucking pretentious and cruel to make us go through that. Like, fuck that guy.
Regarding Hard Times, that was the first time that I had not completely finished a novel in an English class. I didn't actually read the book. And then on top of that, it was also the first time I plagiarized because I used Christy Pasquale's essay from the year prior and copied his basically and turned that in, and I got an A. So
I'll say this about Hard Times. It's appropriately titled because it's Hard Times getting through that fucking book. That's advertising. That's accurate.
it was terrible. It was written in the vernacular of the time and with using the accent. So it was like impossible to get through the fucking dialogue without thinking about everything that they were saying to try to figure out what does tisa'ama'o mean? What the fuck does that mean? You know, it was terrible.
Let's get back to the initial memory, your experiences with this haphazard attempts to get high from unconventional sources.
Well, I didn't necessarily try to get high off of weird shit, but I mostly watched other people do silly things. I don't remember drinking nutmeg. I remember being in the room while it was being prepared. One thing I do remember is spending the night at Spoolie D's house when his mother and stepfather were out of town on a trip, and we found a bottle of papaya extract pills. They're like a vitamin basically, and somehow I don't know how we determined this, but we figured out that it was a base. And so we thought, okay, let's take like a handful of the papaya extract, and then since it's a base, we're going to counteract it with an acid. So we then took a handful, the equivalent amount of vitamin C pills, and we worked out like, you know, how many milligrams were in each papaya extract pill and how many milligrams were in the vitamin C pills so we could balance it out perfectly. We weren't trying to get high. We were just trying to find out if something was going to happen if we took too much. And, you know, of course, nothing did. Nothing did.
I know some of this will probably make my parents unnerved. They watch this show. But if there's anything positive to take from this is that none of us were attracted to crank at that time. Crank was the precursor to meth. It was meth, but it was a certain type of junk meth that was widely used by a lot of our area. And
well, there's also that horrible Catherine Wheel song that probably also helped revolt us from crank.
I don't even know that.
I like them. Anyway.
I kind of like that song too, I have to admit.
Yeah. Catherine Wheel were good. As far as drinking cough syrup goes, I did, but I was in my 20s. So, I mean, it wasn't like I didn't have access to other stuff. I just discovered that if you drank Robitussin maximum strength cough, it actually had a dissociative effect. Like, it was like a very strong acid trip. I drank it in public. I drank it at a coffee shop because you drink a whole bottle of it to get off on it. I realized, oh God, okay, I can't cope in public anymore. I got to go home. So I went home and lied in bed, and it was the strongest hallucinatory experience I've ever had in my entire life. It was absolutely incredible. With lying in bed, I couldn't move. I somehow felt that I was shrinking and becoming more and more dense until I became a singularity. And then I exploded and became a leaf for like several hours. And it was the most blissful experience I've ever had in my entire life. And it freaked me out so much I would not drink any cough syrup after that. I was just of any kind. It was just intense. It was just far too intense.
Sounds like a very art lordish hallucination right there. I birthed the art lord in a hallucination from cough syrup.
It was pretty good.
My hunch is Nathan never engaged in any of this.
I don't think I really ever experimented with alternative ways of getting high. Like, I remember I went through a phase when I was like 12 or 13 where I was smoking weird herbs from the kitchen just to try to see what would happen, like basil or oregano, just rolling it up in some random paper and smoking it. I remember going to coffee shops with Jason specifically. We'd go to coffee time, and I remember taking the tobacco out of a cigarette and rolling up pepper, ground pepper in cigarettes and smoking it. That was a horrible, horrible, horrible experience to breathe in smoke from pepper. There was a summer where there was like the summer of nitrous where someone figured out that you could go to the party store in the mall, I think you had to go in one at a time because they would only sell you one packet per person. So we'd like stagger our trips into the party store and just buy like 32 nitrous at a time just to get high off those. That was the cheapest and dumbest form of alternative high I can think of. The one that I really think of, though, and it is kind of drug adjacent, but it's not. Like, people who smoke weed now can go to a store and buy weed. So they don't understand, like, the shitty fucking weed that we used to smoke back in the day. It was like 75, I'm being generous, 75% horrible, seedy, gross weed, and then maybe 25% good weed. But when you couldn't find any weed, what we did was scrape resin. And that to me is such a shitty, horrible, like, you'd be better off not getting high at all. Because resin, you'd get out your dumb little 80s, 90s metal pipes and unscrew the parts and then scrape this tar out of them and then smoke that. And it would like run out of the pipe and stain your lips and your teeth, and it tasted like tar. Oh, it was just awful. I can't imagine that people who smoke weed now actually do that. So that's probably something people now can't really relate to in terms of getting high.
What is it? The copper pipes or whatever, the metal pipes that we used to smoke of. And then everybody's like, hey, you shouldn't smoke out of those. You'll get Alzheimer's. I'm like, I think I'm going to be getting other shit.
The nitrous thing, thank you for bringing that up, Nathan. I'm the only person I know you could probably equate to being a nitrous junkie. Like, to the point where I wasn't like talking to people. I was just sitting in the couch by myself, like just fucking cracking one after another and just waiting for the balloon to warm up enough so I can just crack another. I did like a whole box in a row. And Mario came home and my lips were blue because I just wanted to see how many I could take in a row and tolerate. It got to the point where like Mario wanted someone to intervene on my nitrous problem.
It scares people because my later drug addiction, I went through a bit of a nitrous phase. And after a night of doing much more scary drugs, it was the nitrous that put a mutual friend of ours in a little uneasiness. And after a night of doing my drugs, it inspired my joke. I said, yeah, I got the kind of friends that are like, we're going to have fun. We're going to get fucked up, Dave. And then later that night, they're telling me, Dave, I think you have a problem. And I did. So they weren't wrong.
Imagine somebody coming into your room like at midnight and just saying, hey, we need to talk. I'm like, okay. And it's like, very concerned about your nitrous problem. And I swear to God, like I could not stop laughing. Not because it wasn't true, but just the absurdity of that conversation, given the amount of drugs that we were around all the time. And like I wasn't doing really smoked weed, but like for the most part, I just like got into this groove with nitrous and I just couldn't stop. But like that whole intervention, I was like almost like laughing, crying, like slapping my hand on the ground because it was so ridiculous. But
he's talking about,
that's a huge bitch.
Oh, got you. Okay.
Yeah. Because she treated me like I was a junkie for smoking weed. So it, like, oh my God, you're getting high again. No, I'm smoking weed, bitch.
That fits. Yeah, my impression of her. You get the feeling they were like kind of acting out like an after-school special.
Mario was just stirring up shit. If you really want to know what was behind all of that, it's just Mario fucking being a shit disturber and trying to fucking cause drama. That's all that was. But it manifested itself into someone confronting me seriously as if I was like in there fucking slamming heroin.
Like the episode of Saved by the Bell where like, don't they have an intervention with someone for using caffeine pills or something? It's on that level of just like, oh my God, I'm out of control. I'm doing nitrous. Okay.
Elizabeth Berkley, man. Showgirls. That was her. All right. Well, I think we've kind of covered this. We don't have time. We'll save it for another meaningful memory of involving people wanting to see other people's junk. So a little teaser for future episodes. Stay watching Meaningful Times with Friends. All right. Our next topic, moving on. This was on the list like way back in early Meaningful Times with Friends. We never got around to it. Always planned to, always intended to. And it is the topic of face tattoos. Face tattoos is somewhat of a peeve of one of our members, and I'll let him speak up on it specifically. So, Nathan Nation, please lead off.
I don't know if I suggested this as a topic. I've just brought it up multiple times, and so I think you probably were like, "Yeah, let's talk about it." So, curious to see where this goes if we can turn it into a topic. Yeah, in our chat, I think I'm kind of like Jerry Seinfeld with this shit. Like, what's the deal with face tattoos? Because I don't know, tattoos are super mainstream and normal these days. It's not like you see someone who's all tatted up and you feel shocked about it. But I feel like face tattoos are taking it to a whole different level. Like, I get face tattoos in the context of, okay, you work in a piercing or tattoo store. That's going to be your life's work. Got it. Or you're in a prison gang for the rest of your life. You're in the Aryan Brotherhood or MS-13. You're doing life in prison. Got it. Face tattoos. Makes sense. You got to look like a scary-ass motherfucker. but just being like some normie out on the street who decides to get your face tattooed, it seems like you've gone a step too far, and maybe someone should have taken you aside and just been like, do you really want to tattoo your face? Like, you're not a famous rapper, you're not Mike Tyson. Part of it is growing older and becoming reflective about who I was when I was younger, I think, because I have a lot of shit that I've done that I regret. And if I had tattooed something on my face when I was like 23 years old, I would fucking hate it now. I'd be like, what the fuck did I just do? And so I don't know what to make of the proliferation of face tattoos. Is it just another step in tattoos becoming more normal? Or is it people who've given up all hope on life? I'm not sure what to make of it. And I guess that's kind of like my general take, because at the end of the day, people can do what they want with their bodies. It's like I said in our last episode when I was kind of making fun of Maddie Matheson, right? When I said people should start doing tattoo interventions on people, like you've gone too far. Like, ultimately, you're not hurting anybody by tattooing yourself. When you look at that dude Jelly Roll, I sent you all a picture of Jelly Roll because those giant screens that are outside of my office, and I have to see his face 5 times a day or whatever. I do not get it. So yeah, maybe you guys can explain to me what's behind face tattoos.
Since they're no longer shocking or weird tattoos, that is, in general, I think it's like the next like frontier of being shocking with tattoos, you know? It's become so normal to have a tattoo on your arm or your leg or your shoulder or whatever, that in order to really take that next step, you got to get it right on your goddamn face. I think that's all it is, really. It's funny because I remember there was a time when the only face tattoos I saw were from really hardcore people who were kind of like vaguely scary. The people that I knew who had face tattoos were people that I didn't want to get too close to, you know, in a personal sense. Because like I knew they were into shit like chaos magic and shit like that. Your general like kind of gothy weirdo here, you're a little too witchy for me, you know? And those are the face tattoo people that I knew.
What's chaos magic?
It's magic. You focus your will and make sigils, and you know, you do sacrifices and shit like that in order to get outcomes. You focus your energies toward a particular outcome, and then if you believe in this shit, you will get your outcome, but at a cost. And so sometimes the cost can cause your house to burn down. This is not a hypothetical. This is what somebody told me happened to them. His family ended up separating from him. They were scared of him because all these horrible things kept happening, ostensibly because he was involved in chaos magic and had been tampering with forces that were beyond, you know, comprehension kind of shit. And he had face tattoos, you know, not like I went to a tattoo artist, but like my friend like wrapped a thread around a needle and dipped it in India ink and then stick and poke tattoos, like, but all over his face. And it was just like, it's really intense. I don't buy these tattoos behind Dave, by the way. I feel like those are like makeup. They don't look like
you think? Yeah, it's
they don't look like actual
all
tattoos.
hyperbole there, Art Lord. You should be able to figure it out. Sorry.
Thank you. I think chaos magic deserved an explanation.
You're throwing chaos magic into the fucking show. Oh, that sounds like his cough syrup witchcraft. So there you go.
That'd be a good band name. I'm more interested in chaos magic now than I am. It's like, let's say you're a wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons and you're like wanting so badly to date a member of TLC. Yeah, face tattoos. I don't know, like it's your face and like that's what gives you the first impression. Unless you have like an astonishing body, like good or bad. Like most people are going to look at your face first and make an impression. And I think you're obviously trying to make a statement outward. You can't really prove this, so this is a hypothesis. But to me, it's like, I want to project something to the rest of the world. And to me, that's a little bit weird in that, like, it's so important to me that I project this to you. And this is the first thing you're going to notice about me. Because someone has a face tattoo, that's the absolute fucking first thing you're going to notice about them. Unless it's someone like Jelly Roll, where you're like, that dude's really fat. Oh, and he has face tattoos. Maybe that's his tactic. Like, if I were built like Jelly Roll, maybe I would have a face tattoo as well. But then again, this could be just my prejudice in my own head. But to me, it's just like, you're fronting. You're trying to avoid like people seeing you. And so you're throwing all this shit at them as a distraction and as an intimidation, right? Like it worked on Jason. He's like, this person's a fucking sorcerer. Like, get away from me. So I don't go around thinking about it, but I've never had this thought. Ooh, that looks really good. And again, that's just my taste. I'm an older gentleman. By the way, my mother has face tattoo, Nathan.
What did she do? Her eyebrows?
Eyeliner.
Okay, yeah.
It looks good. But I know that's not what you're talking about.
The early face tattoos primarily were the teardrop, the prison teardrop, which would indicate murder. Probably the most mainstream early face tattoo that everyone kind of had a collective reaction to was Mike Tyson. But there's no doubt somebody who inspired him.
It was clearly Chakotay from Star Trek Voyager.
Clearly. I don't watch that shit. Once Mike did it in, like, when did he do the face tattoo? Was that the late 90s or no one remembers here?
It had to be in the 2000s, I would guess.
It was early enough for it to be shocking, and little by little you would see more acceptable, little trinkets on people's faces. I saw it primarily start to kind of trickle in more everyday fare during the SoundCloud rapper era. Being an addict in recovery, I see a lot of them because there's a lot of people who, shocker, do drugs and have drug problems with face tattoos, but it's not all of them. And nowadays, as Nathan stated, there's people that are working in careers that allow them to do so, but there's even now a lot more people working in mainstream jobs that have, I think somebody was talking about they cashed a check in like New Mexico and the person working the bank teller had face tattoos. So it's a lot more common now. And it started as being, yes, a signifying mark of, hey, you want to avoid this person. This person is kind of trouble. As with all things, with today, like a diminishing return aspect to the culture. I look at it kind of like it's the face version of all the t-shirts I would wear in junior high and still do to some extent. But actually today I don't wear the shirts that I would want to in junior high that were very provocative. My dad wanted me to go to Moreau High School, which is a private school. And my whole reasoning for not going was I can't wear my Danzig t-shirts here. I'm not going here. That meant a lot to me. The other thing, too, to consider, along with tattooing, another industry that grew with it is tattoo removal. Those are now a lot more common, where if people don't like their tattoos now, they can easily get them removed. It'll cost something, but chances are the people that can afford tattoos can also drudge up the money, set up a GoFundMe or some shit to remove their tattoos.
My wife has had 2 tattoos removed, and she said it was like so much more painful than getting a tattoo, on orders of like magnitude so much worse than getting a tattoo. So I can see that being a deterrent, especially for getting something removed from your face.
Good. Here's the thing. I don't have any friends with face tattoos. All that tells me is that it's probably more of a generational thing. Even the young people that I'm friends with, I know people with a lot of sleeve tattoos. One of my best friends is a comedian, Teddy Hall, lives in Germany now, and he is covered all over with tattoos, none on his face. He's got the full-on sleeves, full body. It's ridiculous, his tattoos, but none on his face. I follow a lot of thirst traps on social media. A lot more of them, make their living through being an online sex worker or what sorts. They'll get some here and there. It does seem to be like kind of a more acceptable thing with younger people, being that they can still find avenues of work with them. It just makes me remember, I'm like, I remember when they used to be kind of like, they would inspire like, oh, better avoid that person. Now it's more like, I better avoid that person. More out of like, they're on some bullshit probably that, required a face tattoo. It's not the fear factor. It's more just the nuisance factor. But I don't want to generalize. I did know one guy in recovery. I think we ran into each other on BART. There was a guy that I recognized. I couldn't remember why I recognized him. I said, I know you, don't I? And then we reconnected, and he has a weird name, too. He was a rapper, but he was a dad and all that, and he was in recovery. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. That's the dude with face tattoos. He's in my phone somewhere. I don't need to say his rapper name.
Nathan, so how do you feel about neck tattoos not on the face?
I wouldn't want to get one. I don't know. I think we've become more accustomed to neck tattoos being sort of a normal thing now. Like I remember when we were in high school, there was a dude that had XIV tattooed huge on the back of his neck. Do any of you remember that guy?
I don't remember the guy, but I've seen them. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, but think about it. This is a guy who was probably 17 and had a giant gang tattoo on the back of his neck when he was in high school. That's sort of the root of where I remember neck tattoos. And I think it's just generational. I think it has to do with the fact that for people our age, shit like that signified something hardcore. Obviously, that's changed over the course of time, but it's hard for me to get that connotation out of my head. Not about passing judgment. It just seems like a lot.
Well, it's funny that you say that it signifies something hardcore. The people that get them do think something of themselves as being hardcore. It's just I don't think it works. There's other signifying factors. Somebody kind of has an intense charisma about them where it's like, oh yeah, this person's probably been around or done some fucked up shit. Whereas nowadays it's sort of like, see somebody, I'm like, you grew up in the suburbs. Face tattoos today are kind of like the people that we knew growing up who are not black, who would try to pull off saying the N-word with the A at the end.
The only N-word I ever dropped was nitrous oxide.
That was funny. Face tattoos. We try not to judge them here at Meaningful Times with Friends, but chances are we're not your friends. So, just saying. All right, moving along. I doubt anybody with face tattoos watches this fucking show. Our last topic, we got a song that wasn't necessarily consciously suggested. It was Spooley's turn to pick the song, and Spooley, amidst whatever riffing he was doing in the chat, decided, hey, how about we do Van Halen's Right Now? And being a sarcastic suggestion, wasn't a bad one. For those of the show who may not know or remember who the fuck Van Halen is, it was a band by Eddie Van Halen with his brother,
Alex
Van Halen. There's two halves to Van Halen's career. First half, made famous with David Lee Roth. And then there's the second half, which is with Sammy Hagar. And this is referred to as the Van Hagar era of Van Halen. Van Halen's Right Now is our song for today. So, Spooley, go ahead, talk your shit.
No, first of all, I wasn't being sarcastic about it. I'd thought about it because I think about that song every once in a while because it was a weird cultural phenomenon. You know, it's just one of those things that pops in my head, like, I don't know, like once every couple months, like, what the fuck was that? And when I watched it again, I'm like, oh God. Like, I remember it being very popular. And it's one of those things like, you're not going to really experience the full brunt of that song just audibly. Like, you have to watch the video because the song was really nothing without the video. And I think they reused it like that whole gimmick, which is like what Behind Dave, like the entire video for the song is just a bunch of preachy phrases going on in the background. The song itself is kind of unremarkable. It's got a weird, like, epic piano intro, and it doesn't sound anything like Van Halen, really. Or even if you talk about like Sammy Hagar, he was this gravitational force or like this ankle weight that was dragging them slowly, like song by song, album by album, into soft rock, like from whatever they were. Arguably, he's a better vocalist, like with pure voice than David Lee Roth. But it's not like I'm any one of those people that's like, I really like the David Lee Roth era, but not Sammy Hagar or vice versa. Like, whatever. Like, the only thing I liked of David Lee Roth was the first intro to the Yankee Rose video where he's in a convenience store.
We discussed that in the Oops All Guest Friends episode. So.
Oh, really? Yeah, sorry, I didn't watch it.
Yeah, you should watch the fucking show.
The other weird thing about Van Halen, if you notice, Alex Van Halen, if you ever look at his drum set, it's like he has the most drums I've ever seen out of any human being. And he's always fucking hitting something. There's no point in a Van Halen song where he's not hitting some sort of version of a ride cymbal. But if you actually listen to it, he only needs like maybe 10% of the drums he actually has. And my theory on this, I didn't really think about it until I was listening to the song, him hitting that incessant ride again. You didn't remember his fucking name, and you're like a music head. Like, he's so in the shadow of Eddie Van Halen that he has to like overcompensate with the world's biggest drum set and never not fucking making a noise with it. It's very weird. Otherwise, the song itself, it starts out bad. Like, you get that epic piano. At this point, Van Halen had been around for what, like at least 12, 13 years? Ever heard anyone publicly refer to Eddie Van Halen or Edward Van Halen as Ed? They did it twice during the song. It's like, right now, Ed is playing the piano. And then when he's doing his solo, it said, right now, Ed has his hands full. That, to me, always was kind of off-putting. The other piece of it was the fact that they were super fucking concerned about safe sex. That was interesting. Because I forgot about that, right? Like, that was a huge thing. It was before I think everyone realized that Anthony Fauci created AIDS to sell pharmaceuticals, but you can cut that out.
That's a huge bitch.
The one thing like they got really wrong is I really liked the guy who said, I will wrestle you for food. Like, that guy was awesome. He's like, he's going about it the wrong way. I completely disagree. I think that guy was absolutely going about it the right way. I would have given that guy money and not wrestled him. I would have just given him money. I like right now there's a madman roaming the streets of your town. I thought that was good. And then the one that really bothered me, though, Dave, was it showed like a bunch of migrants climbing into a truck. And it said, right now, someone is working too hard for minimum wage. It's like the whole point of hiring illegals is to not have to pay them minimum wage. It's like to pay them less. So I thought that one was a big fucking swing and a miss by Van Hagar. That's all. You're welcome.
Thankfully, I didn't get to hear the last of what Spooley said. Merely Jason?
This song feels like it was designed to be licensed for commercial use. It's built to sell products like trucks, maybe, or life insurance or something. I remember when this was out, unfortunately, it coincided with the time in my life where I watched the most MTV. So it was on heavy rotation and was just like inescapable. And it was absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. It was just kind of the most middle of the road, lukewarm, boring shit. It was just really, really bad. Early Van Halen with David Lee Roth was fun. They were a fun band. They were like rocking and everything, but this was the opposite of that. This was like verging on adult contemporary kind of vibe. It was just really bad. And then the fact that they kind of like anticipated the whole Apple advertising with the like stark white background and text kind of thing. So that's kind of interesting. They were kind of ahead of their time there. Yeah, this song is just absolutely dreadful.
Honest thought there. Nathan Nation.
I don't think I'd ever actually listened to this song in its entirety or ever watched the video until now. I sent you guys a link to that minute-long Crystal Pepsi commercial that came out shortly after this, and I've got to think that had to have been like a Super Bowl commercial. It had the feel of like one of those epic and long Super Bowl commercials that you always see. So listening to the entire song, I felt the same way as Jason. This is dull. There used to be a guy in my neighborhood who was like a cop or something, and every weekend he would take his boat out on the bay fishing, and when he'd get back, he'd be out in his front yard like hosing his boat down and cleaning it and then like washing his Camaro. This sounds like the kind of bullshit that middle-aged dude from like 1991 would have been playing out in his yard. That's exactly the vibe I got, was like dad music from 1991. I read when they made the video, Hagar was kind of miserable. He was pissed off that they put all these captions in the videos, and he felt that it detracted from his poignant lyrics. And so, it's funny, I didn't even bother to read the lyrics to see what he was saying. And that's why at some point in the video, it makes a transition into putting on the screen what Hagar is singing. I think there is some point where briefly they show what the lyrics are, and I think that was at his insistence that the lyrics get some sort of credence. I saw Van Halen once, like in the early 2000s when they reunited with David Lee Roth. It was actually a really good show. It was fun. Hagar wasn't a part of that. I don't really like the years that he was with Van Halen. Not that I was a huge Van Halen fan anyway, but yeah, this was just dull, boring dad music. And this sort of has the same feel as We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. It's trying to make a statement. In the Billy Joel video, it's like showing historical clips, and this is like, wear a condom and black and white people aren't eating together and blah, blah, blah. So fairly dull and really not doing a good job at being poignant. Do you remember back in the day when they would make a huge deal about a video coming out, like, 8 o'clock tonight, it's the world premiere of Guns N' Roses' new video? This has the feel of one of those epic videos that would have gotten some big,
like Michael Jackson's Black or White.
Yeah, exactly, or Thriller, something like that.
Right now, I just remember it from the Van Hagar era. I was never a Van Halen fan that much as a kid. They were around before MTV. So I became more familiar with the Van Hagar era of Van Halen. You suggested, Spoolie, that it was Hagar's influence, and this was completely Eddie Van Halen. He was the Vince McMahon of Van Halen, hence the name Van Halen. He was, from what I understand, making conscious choices to do things that he wanted to do but couldn't because he was the guitar god and all of that, and he wanted to incorporate more keyboards and piano and other instruments. And I'm willing to bet that he wanted to make more commercial music because it isn't just this song. Almost all of 5150 and For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, they really thought they were clever.
OU812 also had a bunch of schlock on it, like How Do I Know If It's Love is just, like Jason said, adult contemporary.
It was a conscious choice, and it's primarily for money. Eddie Van Halen, the stories about him playing guitar, it came so easy to him, he was bored with it. I don't think Eddie had the most amount of fondness for the fans, per se. I think he wanted money. He's a businessman as well as a musician. When you can do things well and it comes easy to you and you notice that you can make some big paychecks, you can see both of these phases of the band. The first half was definitely more inspired into the attitude of rock and roll and all of that, thumbing your nose at society and all that. In the second half, I jokingly said it was maturity, but it's not so much maturity as you're getting old and you want to cash in. And these songs were written completely with the intention, I feel, of cashing in. The song that I actually still like from this whole time period of Van Halen, because it's so goddamn corny, is Dreams. And you won't know it by the title, but everybody knows the Get Higher and Higher. Of all things, their video is just the fucking Blue Angels flying. There's nothing of the band. It is just jets flying. If there's anything that was like more subversively pro-military, I mean, it might as well have been a Michael Bay movie of a video.
They probably got a check from the military or something.
They probably did. And that's kind of what this whole phase of Van Halen was straight up to cash in. Eddie, he was a dictator of Van Halen. That's where all of those arguments come from. Michael Anthony was the bass player, but that's why they could kick him out and put in, Van Halen's son or whoever else he wanted in that role. He controlled all of it, even his brother Alex. Yeah, Alex is a great drummer. Having a big set, you're right, I never paid attention to him. The most I've noticed Alex Van Halen is the beginning drum lick to Hot for Teacher. This particular song right now, these guys were like the Imagine Dragons forefathers of writing specifically aimed at selling it to corporations for product use. The video, when I went back to watch it, the funny thing about it is like a commercial. I was initially like, oh, I forgot. This almost seems clever. And I thought it might have been clever. And then I watched it a second time. And I'm like, oh, no, this is incredibly droll. Seen it with new eyes as an older person. And initially I thought it was kind of funny. I don't know if anybody brought up the line, right now, God is killing moms and dogs. That is probably the best line. The fact that God is doing it was great. This is just the Van Halen version of that very same Bob Dylan, fucking throwing the signs and shit. It is. We traced it back. We traced that. We have the NXS video, and this is the Van Halen version. Like, hey, man, let's put some lines on the song right now of all the whatever. And I'm pretty sure the band came up with some of them, but not all of them, because the only person who mentions Cabo is fucking Sammy Hagar. He's made a career out of Cabo Wabo.
Yeah, he's got tequila to sell.
But that was before the tequila. That dude's been in love with Cabo since his time in Van Halen. So something about that place.
In that same Wikipedia article, he said these are the best lyrics I've ever written in my life.
I have to admit, I actually do love the song I Can't Drive 55. That song, that video is hilarious. That song kind of rocks. This is just fluff. It's bullshit compared to some of his earlier stuff that actually kind of rocked. Didn't he have like a nickname, like he was the Red Rocker or something stupid like that?
I have a live LP of his that's pretty good. It's somewhere still in my records. I listened to it a few times. I'm like, this is actually better than anything I've heard from him. It was from that whole era where Pat Travers and all those rocker guys that only old school musicians would know who they are. I remember a song that my stepdad would play from a live album. Boom, boom, and no, out go the lights. Probably get a text from my stepdad reminding me who that is. But this whole era of Van Halen was like them taking all of their experience from their younger years and making a classic 80s executive decision. We're going to sober up and we're going to make all of these business moves. We're going to write these songs consciously aimed at getting money. And it worked. They still are used today. But they're not cherished the same way as early Van Halen. Make that money. Get that money. And that's probably why we have kind of an aversion to it. I'm not sure if any of us are really conscious ballers.
It's not the aversion about being commercial. It was just fucking terrible. So the song itself was even just for a 90s pop song, it was pretty shitty. The chorus, the hook is shitty, just screaming right now. And
you can say something's shitty and terrible all you want, but it worked. I agree that, it's not something I'm going to put on, but there's a reason why it gets people to buy products. There's something inherent in music whenever you use certain notes, some phrases, whatever, that evokes feelings. And these guys tapped into whatever it is that's like, I want to spend money on this. Obviously, I don't speak for you. It sold a lot of albums, and it was used by a lot of companies to then sell a lot of products, and they wouldn't do that if it wasn't working. And on that regard, I couldn't say it's terrible other than just I don't like it. I don't put on old jingles to be like, hey, let me listen to that music from that fucking commercial back in 1985.
You know what's funny? I actually did throw on the fucking Honey of an O, Honey Nut Cheerios jingle yesterday.
Mm-hmm. It's funny.
I legit watch old Paul from the Diamond Center commercials all the time. They're out there.
I'm a credit
He's a
man.
Credit Man's a way
He's
better
a credit man.
right
Yeah,
now.
it's good shit.
Absolutely. There's some good commercial shit out there, but that wasn't the point I was trying to make. The reason I didn't like it wasn't because it was commercial and effective, and I wasn't saying it wasn't effective. What I was saying is it's just not, it's like a mediocre song that relied on a gimmick, and the gimmick was trying too hard, to quote a brilliant man I know, to fucking seem profound and meaningful, and it was just fucking heavy-handed schlock.
That's what all of those albums are. This isn't the only one. That's why I said the song Dreams is the very same thing.
Yeah, that's horrible.
You don't apply this same logic to Imagine Dragons. And Imagine Dragons is every bit as much as what these motherfuckers are doing.
That's your assertion?
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think when they wrote this, the intention was to sell soda pop and chips? Like, as they were writing this, were they like, this is a great fucking jam, or were they like, nah, we're just going to use this for commercials?
These are not inspired jams. These guys were just good songwriters and musicians that understood what worked on people. Same way that Danny Elfman, I don't think he necessarily has such a great inspiration to write theme music for all of the movies that he does. It's a job, and these people are talented enough to take those skills and like look at something that they may not even particularly like, but if they sign on to do it, they're going to work it. And he can whip up some shit. He made the theme song for the first Spider-Man movies. I cannot imagine Danny Elfman being a huge fan. Speaking of which, Danny Elfman, kind of not a far cry from getting a face tattoo himself these days, if you've looked at him yoked with all the tattoos. These guys, they're professionals, and they work at a level that's beyond us. We're sitting here trying to clamor for 100 to 200 views.
Speak for yourself. The other thing in that Wikipedia article is like Eddie Van Halen's been fucking hauling around that stupid piano lick since 1984. And he was saying basically like nobody wanted anything to do with that stupid riff. And they used it. I can't remember. They used it in some movie. He's had a fucking raging hard on for that piano lick. And he's been trying to use it in something for at least 10 years. They felt like this is going to be high art. That's the vibe I got. And I'm not saying I'm right. You guys might be right. This is how I took it.
Right now, Spoolie is not just feeling misunderstood. He's being misunderstood.
Well, you can type that in your box, David.
I'm not typing nothing. I don't need to try to be funny.
Wow.
I think we can all agree that rock stars should be the ones to tell us to wear condoms, because I know that they must.
These songs all come from a place of like dealing with the consequences of the earlier behavior. And fucking Vince Neil, as part of the punishment for drunk driving and crashing and killing his buddy, was that he had to do fucking drug commercials. Like commercials telling people to be responsible. That was part of his community service punishment. It wasn't done from a place of like, he's really saying it. He's an example of what happens when you do it. And so people are like, yeah, so we really need you to say something that you don't really mean. Oh, the one thing we didn't bring up yet was that these lines, long before woke was a term, this comes off as very woke, especially with the, some people right now are being exploited for minimum wage and showing all the Mexicans from a parking lot about to be day laborers. Right now, blacks and whites aren't able to eat together very often. Right now, your parents miss you. Not the case if your parents are dead or if your parents abandoned you. So it's not all parents. Don't know what the point of that was, but I don't know what the point of suggesting a song you think is terrible.
That's literally what I always do.
Not always.
I think if you go back a few episodes, maybe like 10 episodes.
I don't watch the show with that in mind there, buddy. And I'm not going to listen to somebody who doesn't watch the show tell me to go back a few episodes.
Clearly from the conversation, there's a fucking lot here with this song. And it was a cultural phenomenon. So I guess you're welcome.
Yeah, no one's thanking you. I think we've said enough. Right now, we need to end the show. Another episode in the bank. This will be a joy to fucking edit. Want to thank everybody for being here. Nathan Nation, thank you. Merely Jason, thank you. Right now, Spoolie D, thank you. Going up a notch today. I mean Dave. We'll be back. Meaningful Times with Friends. Thank you for watching.